I believe that there is a lot to do with the vision the Qataris have vis-a-vis the vision the Saudis have or the Emiratis have to the region. And one side, Qatar, was from the first day supportive of the Arab Spring. It didn't cause the Arab Spring, it caused itself, but they supported it. And there are those from the first day who didn't support it. So in a way, that has all created further issues and problems and tensions in the region. We're still where we are, where we were before the Arab Spring. So issues of employment, unemployment, dictatorship, democracy, human rights, participation of populations in elections, and saying what they want, what they didn't. So what we see still in this region is a situation where politics is over everybody, over economics, over people, over decisions, and without addressing these fundamental issues. Back to the original slogans of the Arab Spring. People wanted participation and wanted dignity and wanted a fair participation in the economy. That is less monopoly and less corruption.
And those problems aren't going to go away by asking Qatar to stop supporting the groups that were involved.
It will only complicate these problems further.
Mr. Ghabra, thank you very much for that for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's get more on this now. We're joined by Shafeeq Ghabra, Professor of Political Science at Kuwait University. Mr. Ghabra, very good to have you with us on Al Jazeera.
My pleasure.
Over a week now into the crisis. Let's start with the regional efforts led by the Kuwaiti Emir. Where are we at with those?
It's not clear all the time where are we at. It's clear that the attempt was made by the Emir of Kuwait, highly welcomed by those who want to see a peaceful resolution to the crisis in the region as well as in Qatar. But where is it? I think there is a lot that is going on behind closed doors, and that Kuwait, as its foreign minister has reiterated just a couple of days ago, that they will not give up on mediating and finding a peaceful way out.
And there are others who are trying to do the same, because the unity of the Gulf Cooperation Council is so important to the region, especially given the wars raging in the region right now, Syria, Iraq, Yemen. Turkey's calling for dialogue and trying to resolve the issue. It's on Qatar's side. Iran is also calling for dialogue. I mean, just how important, we can't overstate how important it is to resolve this.
It's very important to resolve. At the same time, it seems that the Qataris have discovered so many strategic issues in the way they see the region. And so now they are also making decisions. You have a Turkish base to be developed in Qatar. You have certain relations with the Iranians on food and support. Morocco came to their support. Kuwait came to their support, at least through the negotiation, trying to get negotiations going. Oman, on the other hand. So the Qataris are finding a different world that will have implications once this crisis is over. So things, in a way, hopefully will improve, and this boycott will end at some point. Maybe some form of an agreement will take place, but I doubt that the GCC will be the same again. I think after this crisis, it's a totally different situation.
The Saudi foreign minister, you know, Saudi, the most powerful, influential member of the Gulf Cooperation Council, he's in Washington, D.C. Do you think that his efforts in D.C. are going to help resolve the conflict, especially given Adel al-Jubeir's sort of very harsh comments about Qatar so far?
I'm not sure. I think also the Qataris are having a lot of effort in D.C. as well. So we have now some competition going on regarding who has Washington's ear and which institution in Washington gives you...
The Saudis seem to so far, especially if you listen to what President Trump is saying.
Whatever the president has said has added to the fires, has added to the hatreds, has brought the crisis to another level, and think there is a lot to learn from what the president said and what other institutions, such as the foreign ministry, also said. But I think that we're still in a place where everybody is discovering their cards, their strength. Now, if you tell me this crisis is all about who supported the Arab Spring and who didn't,
you're not buying it.
I'm buying this in a way. I believe that there is a lot to do with the vision the Qataris have vis-a-vis the vision the Saudis have or the Emiratis have to the region. And one side, Qatar, was from the first day supportive of the Arab Spring. It didn't cause the Arab Spring, it caused itself. But they supported it. And there are those from the first day who didn't support it. So in a way, that has all created further issues and problems and tensions in the region. We're still where we are, where we were before the Arab Spring. So issues of employment, unemployment, dictatorship, democracy, human rights, participation of populations in elections, in saying what they want, what they didn't. So what we see still in this region is a situation where politics is over everybody, over economics, over people, over decisions, and without addressing these fundamental issues. Back to the original slogans of the Arab Spring. People wanted participation and wanted dignity and wanted a fair participation in the economy. That is less monopoly and less corruption.
And those problems aren't going to go away by
Absolutely.
asking Qatar to stop supporting the groups that were involved.
It will only complicate these problems further.
Mr. Ghabra, thank you very much for that for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's get more on this now. We're joined by Shafeeq Ghabra, Professor of Political Science at Kuwait University. Mr. Ghabra, very good to have you with us. So, Bahraini lawyer detained after challenging, Manama's sanctions against Qatar. Just how concerning is it that that they're arresting a lawyer for filing a case and saying it's incitement against the regime?
So, what does this tell us? It basically tells us that the way this boycott is taking place, the way this approach to dealing with Qatar is lacking in legitimacy, is lacking in the support needed among public opinion. It tells us public opinion were not consulted, has nothing to do with this entire situation. So this is telling us that these institutions of governments are not able to convince their own people and have a limit in their ability to convince a lawyer or more. So to come and arrest people is only counterproductive. We are today in a region where the power of public opinion is on the increase, and it is medieval, fully medieval, to try to limit it or to think that you can limit it.
And what about public opinion? Okay, so this is public opinion of their own citizens within the Gulf Cooperation Council. What about public opinion, outside the GCC? It seems all countries are sort of vying for international support and lobbying for it too.
So there are different levels. You can lobby as much as you want, but when people know the truth, when people know the reality, and the kind of pain this is causing to average citizens, it's not justified, it's not legitimate. I understand there are differences, political issues. You can resolve it between the politicians. Why involve the population? Why say you cannot be sympathetic? You cannot be pro or anti? Let's have a debate about it. We have now states that are afraid of the truth. And you can hide the truth for a while. You can never hide it. And at the end of the day, things will be clear. This boycott will fall out of its own weight. And over time, the call to lift it will be far more stronger than the call to keep it.
And what about the sort of negotiations to try and end the boycott, blockade, siege, whatever you want to call it? Where are we at with that? Is there any progress? You were talking about the truth. Qatar maintains that the allegations against the country don't have any truth behind them, that they are baseless. So while, there doesn't seem to be much progress at the moment.
There isn't much progress, but at least what is clear for now is it seems that the military option is off the table. I hope more permanent. And what is still on is the boycott. But the Qataris are looking for alternatives. They're discovering new friends. They're discovering new strategic options. I think it's a big loss for the whole region. It's a big loss for investments. It's a big loss for the economy. It's a big loss for investors altogether from different countries, from Qatar, from the UAE, from Saudi Arabia, from Bahrain, etc. So I think over time, that will be clear. There are a lot of talks today in Washington, D.C. There are different ministers, whether the Saudi foreign minister, whether the ministers from Qatar, among others. So there is political movement going on. Yeah. I hope this will come to an end. but it has to be a logical end. You cannot be squeezing Qatar because it's a small country. You cannot be squeezing it on issues that have to do with freedom of speech or have to do, I mean, Jazeera, you have Jazeera. I call myself, we have to have 20 Jazeeras in the Arab world, or we have to have 20 Hayat newspapers on the other side. We just maximize that freedom to have a logical debate. And if we don't have these debates within that context, this region will keep repeating its wars, its struggles. It's about managing difference. And if you cannot manage difference within, you will never be able to manage difference on your borders.
Mr. Ghabra, thank you very much for that for now. Thank you. We're going to get more on all of this now. We're joined by Shafeeq Ghabra, Professor of Political Science at Kuwait University. Mr. Ghabra, thank you again. It's been over a week, as we've been saying, since this crisis broke out. These countries severed ties with Doha, imposed a land, sea and air blockade. Everyone's been talking about dialogue and de-escalation, but there doesn't seem to have been any real progress so far. Why is that?
There could be many reasons, but I will single out one main reason. We have a very weak U.S. administration, very divided, weak within. We have no Kissinger. We have no leadership in America. And as a result of that, you have a bureaucratic foreign ministry and a very right-wing structure at the level of the presidency, very personal style that adds to the problem, and therefore it drags because of poor American leadership and lack of strategic thinking within the leadership of the United States.
Yeah, we've heard, different things, not just from within the U.S. administration, from Secretary of State Rex Tillerson on one side and then Donald Trump on the other, but it seems like even different things from the president himself from day to day. The Saudi Foreign Minister Adel Al-Jubeir is now meeting U.S. Secretary of State. How do you expect that to go? Do you see the U.S. moving further towards the Saudis' position as a result of this meeting? Can we anticipate what will happen?
I think the U.S. will try to restrain, try to put some balancing act, but because of weakness, it will not be bold, it will not be enough. And it will allow this to drag for some time with strategic consequences over Iran, Turkey, Qatar, the rest. I mean, there will be
consequences to many people's lives in the region.
So again, that's poor leadership, I think, is at the core of this. And as you see, one testimony after the other from the U.S. administration, one embarrassment after the other for the U.S. president. I think those in the Arab world who are betting on such a leadership in the U.S. are exactly taking themselves and the region into the wrong direction.
Well, the other thing that we've heard from leaders in the region itself is that this is a regional problem. Let's solve it within the framework of the GCC. So where are those efforts that are being led by the Kuwaiti Emir?
The initiative by Kuwait's Emir is the most important initiative within the GCC. Yet, the more it takes time to address it, the longer things get complicated. As you see, the Turks have been involved at one level. The Iranians have opened up their space on another level. Qatar has soft power, amazing amount of soft power. Maybe the way for the future for all the Arab world is to invest in soft power, something we have not invested in. We're calling for closing soft power. I think we have to open more on soft power. And it will just keep that cycle at least until everybody comes to their senses, that this blockade cannot continue, and there has to be some easing at different levels, and that we have to understand that there is a new balance of power going on in that context. And I think the Kuwaiti initiative will continue to be central and important because it is somebody that has not joined this approach of blocking and preventing and boycotting and high emotions. It stayed cool in the middle and trying to bring all the sides to some sort of an agreement, but while respecting the individuality of Doha, equally the individuality of Oman and the individuality of every part, Kuwait, elsewhere. All these younger, smaller states, need a sense of protection and guarantee. And now they understand that the American base doesn't guarantee enough. They understand that there are limits to American power of poor leadership. So I think there will be strategic consequences to this crisis.
Mr. Ghabra, thank you very much for that for now, Shafeeq Ghabra. Thank you. And let's get more on all of this now. We're joined by Shafeeq Ghabra, Professor of Political Science at Kuwait University. The Bahraini government arresting this lawyer for trying to file a case saying that the sanctions against Qatar are affecting people, which we heard from the United Nations Human Rights Chief also saying the same thing. What's going on here?
Well, we discussed this morning, and as you can see, it's also part of a constant attempt to show disrespect to public opinion and to the rights of people to express themselves and to speak their minds. And that's quite an example of the lack of ability to show logic. I mean, when you are logical, when you are clear, you don't need these measures. And in a more open, I mean, how are you going to fight terrorism if you silence people? Isn't terrorism a result of silencing people? Isn't it a result of human rights violations? Whether in the region at large or in any constant when you, I mean, why did the West achieve on a conclusion that they have to respect human rights and to respect the right of people to express sympathies and ideas? They realize it's much easier to do that rather than silence and then end up in instability and end up in anger, frustration, and at a certain level, terrorism and violence.
Yeah, which is what we heard from international lawyer Saad Jabbar earlier, saying that, you know, these nations are very much using the sort of guise of fighting terrorism to actually just silence opposition, silence dissent.
And as we can see, whether we look at the Yemen war, whether we even look at the war against ISIS, you end ISIS, but nobody's really talking about the human toll. And how does this end up contributing to that level? But yes, I agree with you. A big chunk of the rubric or the slogan, fighting terrorism, mixes freedom of speech, expression. I mean, are the Muslim Brothers terrorists? The answer is no. There could be a line of a certain group, more extremist. But the Muslim Brothers, as we know them in Morocco and Kuwait and elsewhere, are not terrorists, even those who are all over in Egypt, etc. So why add terrorists to your definition? Freedom of speech, they are putting it under the rubric of or under the title of terrorism. Difference of opinion is under terrorism. Opposition is under terrorism. Peaceful means of expression are under terrorism. Someone who makes a strike becomes a terrorist. That will only keep creating new terrorists. And if the US doesn't understand this, and if the world doesn't come to this conclusion, then it will never be able to win against terrorism.
For now, the US doesn't seem to be understand it if it is, in fact, taking sides with Saudi Arabia, which is, of course, backing, accusing Qatar, rather, of these very serious allegations of backing, funding terrorism. We've been hearing from the Qatari foreign minister a lot saying that, you know, show us the proof, let's talk about this. These allegations so far are not based in fact, and they are in fact baseless.
When you look at Hamas, let's say, is Hamas a terrorist organization? If you're supporting Gaza's electricity, if you're supporting within United Nations, within the world structure. So the whole idea of terrorism is a way to settle disputes. So who is the terrorist in the end? And then we give this definition of terrorism based on, you're my opponent, then I would say you are a terrorist. But, well, what about state terrorism in the region? Israeli terrorism. Anybody talk about that? What about state terrorism, violence against civilians and violence against the opposition and imprison the opposition? What about that kind of state terrorism in the region? Nobody's talking about that, and that's the core issue, it's state terrorism.
That this crisis is addressing. Mr. Ghabra, thank you very much for that for now. Thank you.